Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and a certified informational privacy professional and provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am a technology attorney who is passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media agencies, and professional and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com. You ready for a fun discussion?
You had me at Web3 and NFT.
Oh my goodness, it's going to be so much fun. I am delighted to introduce Deborah Farber, who is the CEO of Principled LLC and is a global privacy and security advisor, investor, and privacy tech enthusiast with 16 plus years of privacy and security leadership experience, including at AWS, Big ID, Visa, and IBM. And the fun fact is that Deborah and I last remember seeing each other when we used to get together at in-person conferences at IAPP, having coffee at a big round table. And I'm so excited to be able to see and chat with you again today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it has been too damn long.
It really has. Thank you, Zoom, for reconnecting us. So with that in mind, so many interesting companies that you've worked at and a wide swath of experience. So we always like to ask everyone, help us understand your career journey that got you to where you are today.
Yeah, so it's definitely a winding, maneuvering, like a weird path. But I guess getting into privacy 16 years ago, it would have to be an odd path. So I originally went to law school with the hopes that I'd end up in intellectual property law. And while there, I took my copyright law class was being taught. The professor was also teaching privacy law, and I really enjoyed his style of teaching. So I ended up taking privacy law, and then realized that so much of it was addressing like new technology, and instead of it being about, well-settled law, it was around new laws, statutes that would, cover the space. And at the time it was sectoral, like, HIPAA for healthcare and Gramm-Leach-Bliley for financial services. But I kind of was looking to, eat up anything technology related, and thought this is the future, right? Like this is where we're trying with privacy law. We're trying to capture, prevent mistakes as products are being built so that we can protect people. And so that jazzed me up. That got me excited. It felt like a very forward, I don't want to say forward thinking, it's law specifically, but it felt like it was set up to allow future innovation through a lens of, or through guardrails that were set up by the law. And so, after I graduated law school, there were really very few law firms, if any, that were focused on privacy law. It would really be more sectoral, like a healthcare attorney would be doing HIPAA stuff, right? So I ended up going into industry and started my career path at American Express, managing online privacy, and kind of, it maneuvered around, after that, I ended up going into working for a very large, well-funded startup called Revolution Health, founded by Steve Case, the founder of AOL. Which ended up being a massive failure because it was a little before its time, before smartphones. It was trying to do too much social stuff. But at that company, that's where I really learned about the software development process, and how do you fit privacy around the SDLC process so that we're building, compliant and ethical apps and whatever we're building. And so, yeah, and then I went into working for IBM, where I was working with government agencies specifically. So this was in DC, and was working mostly with federal government agencies like the Veterans Affairs, and there, learned a lot about the very peculiar, specific public sector privacy requirements. And then I'm like, you know what, DC's too slow. Everything happens so slowly because policy has to happen first. I really want to go out west to where the innovation is. And I moved out to the Bay Area and was there for about 8 years. I've done a lot. So I would say half my career has been on the consulting end. And on the other half has been kind of more operational, GRC and strategy. I want to stress the strategic part, how required that is to be able to advise product teams on how to build compliantly.
Completely agree on the need for strategy and understanding how privacy is going to fit into the whole company, and not just you need checklists because these are the things that have to actually get done. But then once you're done with them, it doesn't go in the digital dust file. It needs to actually live and breathe. And I bet it's hard to imagine 16 years ago when you started and you had shared law firms, there was barely a privacy practice. And now there's such a fascinating war for talent and so much need for privacy these days. It's been really fun to watch.
Well, that's great to hear, because I'm definitely not in that legal space. I actually have never practiced, right? So I still have never practiced. But I absolutely think my law degree has been super helpful, especially being so early in privacy in navigating this field, especially on the regulatory side. I mean, there's a lot of legislative stuff that I'll look at and I'll advise, but the advice comes through a lens of consulting into standards, I won't interpret law. So it's kind of a fun way to use my law degree without actually practicing law, is kind of through consulting. And then just to round it all out, I guess the innovation side is really what's been I've been impassioned by ever since. And so after, I've gone to some other companies, like Big ID. I was on their, original, I was an advisor to them when they were still pen on paper and just building out the product, a few people, and then came on board as their head of privacy strategy once they raised their money. And now they're the second privacy unicorn. So as a result of, and Big ID is just for anyone who's listening, is in the data discovery space, trying to find all that sprawl of personal data across a large organization and then being able to surface it for various purposes, including giving it back to an individual when they request it. And that began my kind of career in what is now being called the privacy tech space, where we're building products and services specifically for privacy problems, and kind of rally, we're about 15 years, maybe 20 years behind security in that vein. And so I think there's a lot of people who don't realize that privacy and security still are separate things and need their own set of tools to address, and processes and and talent.
Well, that's why we have the She Said Privacy,
He Said Security
podcast, because I think I spend all day long trying to get people to understand that privacy and security are not the same things all day. Right. And then it's always very fascinating. All right. Well, I'm also outnumbered here by the attorneys.
What do you mean? Everyone says that you should have. They wonder if you are an attorney.
I know, but I did not go.
I thought you were an attorney.
See, I am
fascinating.
She spent a lot of time at the law.
I married
at the law school.
Well, I mean, I get it.
We're good. No, I'm not. But I did really. When I went to business school, it was across the street from the law school at Emory, and so I, in undergrad and grad, and genuinely spent a lot of time studying at the Emory Law School library.
Nice.
And people around town genuinely thought I went to law school. And I also had a lot of
great. Some great social engineering.
I did a lot. It's been fascinating. So no, I've just come full circle myself into understanding the law and operationalizing it into business terms. Yes.
I think it's funny what you said about using the law degree in your consulting work. So I do work around drones. So I have positioned myself as I was like, hey, I have my pilot's license for drones and I can help you consult on this and you get the law part for free. It's just included in the deal.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, yeah. I like that. Do you actually have a pilot's license?
Yep, I got
Well,
it in
then that's
January.
pretty cool.
Come hang out in Atlanta and you will get to meet Traveler the drone. He comes out and takes aerial pictures.
Yes, every
That's
time we have
great.
people,
I'll
over.
have to take you up on it.
Please do.
Or you can see us more recently when we're in San Francisco. So Jody and I are speaking at RSA, and our topic is drones and autonomous vehicles, privacy and security versus surveillance.
Oh, I love it. I think that's great. Amazing. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to wheel us back in a little bit.
Let's
Because we could chat. We could chat all day long. Deborah, from your view, how would you describe the current state of privacy programs in companies today?
I would say that the current state for large organizations is maybe a lower maturity, full-on privacy program that really mostly addresses compliance, mostly addresses notice and choice and things you can easily show to a regulator you're complying with, but is probably really, really light on fixing any of the privacy problems in the first place. So probably doesn't have a huge, robust privacy by design program, probably has maybe one or two privacy engineers, if that, trying to figure out how to address a very large problem within the organization. I think most companies understaff privacy tremendously.
If you were to kind of break that privacy by design piece down a little bit more, what do you think is a first step that a company, if they've kind of done the compliance, check the boxes piece, and they're going to move up a little bit, privacy by design, what would you say they should be doing next?
Well, first, I would say that they should be doing kind of an inventory of like their current practices, right? So like you don't want to just start setting up a privacy by design program that's completely a separate entity, like it's a separate thought process from what's currently the design process, right? You want to fit it into what the current procedures, processes, way of working for engineers. And so I would say that first thing I would do is understand like what the product development process is like now. Like where are those potential privacy problems where there's over collection of data and you don't really need it. And maybe it's causing more of a compliance problem down the road. So you'd want to basically map like what are your biggest privacy challenges, your compliance hurdles? Are you getting so many requests for one thing over another? Are you getting requests because your disclosures aren't clear? Are you getting them because your product is opaque and people feel like they can't trust it? So I feel like you got to first understand the privacy challenges within your organization and then work backwards from that. And then prevent those problems from happening with whether it's tech or whether it's, a way you've architected your networks or your services or products. So I do that. And then absolutely key is training. I mean, if you don't understand the principles of privacy and how they're different from security, it's going to be very difficult to get behavioral changes within the organization. So I think training your product development managers and training your engineers, quite honestly, Justin, I don't know how you feel about this, but personally, I want to see the day where you're not even allowed to push any code to production unless you've had a secure code training. I think that there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of potential risks that are introduced in the code process that I know a lot of, there are privacy tech companies now working to address some privacy problems through the development process. And so that I think is going to be a lot of help in de-risking the product development process.
Oh, Deborah, you said something interesting about going through the coding process. And another thing, at least from my experience, and I'd love to get your input, is how often do you, as a company, want to buy a technology solution, whatever it is, you go through a whole sales process and then you get to the contract. And that's really the first time you find out in black and white, not only in the contract, but the privacy policy, what the company is actually collecting, using, sharing, and protecting the data. So I guess my question for you is, How do we bridge the gap, or what are you seeing in terms of how the development people who know coding talk to the business people who don't understand all of that, so that we build privacy by design into this technology like you were talking about?
It's a really good point, because the sales process definitely slows down, right, when you're introducing privacy requirements, because there's just such a lack of, well, I think like what you're saying, like it's almost like, well, you should talk about that sooner, it sounds like, right? If that's going to be a sticking point, then maybe putting the terms up front make a lot more sense, even if you don't have the actual pricing down or whatnot. But I think, yeah, you kind of want to have a meeting of the minds, like started earlier on, where the privacy requirements are addressed. I think I don't really have a full-on answer like how to fix it, but I think you've identified a major problem there, is that the salespeople are kind of an afterthought a lot when it comes to privacy and security. They're like, we're just selling this product, like someone else is going to deal with that, right? But if it's going to be stopping their sales process or slowing it down, or maybe making it a potential to lose a sale, I think that what I have seen is that the salespeople get pretty angry at, or pretty annoyed at, like the legal folks or the privacy folks for not, if they're going to have a requirement that's going to put a bump in the road for them, not giving them a way to like easily jump over it. So what I've seen is salespeople get really annoyed at the privacy people for not having more sales ready information that would satisfy, I guess, the prospect up front, instead of later on at the contracting phase. Now, I don't know whose job it really needs to be. There definitely needs to be some executives from the privacy side and like marketing and sales to kind of come together and be friends and figure out how to get the right resources for the privacy team to create that marketing content, because a regular marketer who's not in the space cannot just all of a sudden write a document around privacy. You can tell, I mean, they can, but you could tell that they did, because it's not written in a way that the privacy professionals need to hear information. So, or expect to hear information. So I think having a better relationship with sales and making sure that it is clear what the privacy team is capable of doing and what they're not, given the number of resources they have. Because again, I think it always comes down to the privacy team being completely under-resourced, and then sales having expectations that, like, their sales, that they're going to be supporting marketing. And if that's the case, they need the resource.
I love that you brought up the connection between privacy and marketing and really creating those sales materials. In talking with companies and working with them, those that really bring it up at the beginning, not only not slow the process down, but you actually can gain more customers, because if you have all of that at the beginning, when the company is evaluating company A versus company B, and it's already there for me to see all of it, it can churn, or it can create more customers up front, which is better.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's it. Lead with trust. Lead with, like, if you don't hide the ball, that makes it seem like you're, trying to be sneaky, right? It's not a partner. I want to go and put like lots of money, buy their service and feel like I'm going to have like a good experience. You want to know that the person, that the product folks or your customer success manager, after the sale is made, you want to know that you're still, being respected by being told the truth and about the product, about potential, I don't know. You basically want to make sure that you have like a good understanding of how you're going to be treated up front before you actually like buy in and are now stuck with a new vendor.
Exactly. You mentioned that privacy is lagging security when it comes to technology. What are you seeing emerge in the privacy tech space? What can you share?
Oh gosh, there's an explosion of privacy tech. I think the perception of privacy right now is at a low, like at least in the United States. I think there are many people who feel like, genie's out of the bottle. They can never bring it back. There is no more privacy. Surveillance capitalism's here to stay. And I'm here to tell them that, like, that's totally valid, but like times are changing. And, I'm seeing the future in that, like, the company. So I'm an advisor to the Rise of Privacy Tech, who's been defining this space. What is privacy tech? What's privacy tech adjacent? What is completely not privacy tech? We've come out with a white paper that articulates and breaks down the area. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet. If not, I can send you a copy. And in it, where we've really broken down like the privacy tech landscape as it's shaping up right now, the different kind of sectors, so to speak, or we were trying to build a tech stack, but that'll come later as we're talking about different use cases. But so here we have examples of like the SDLC process and where privacy is fitting in. For instance, I'm working with a company, I'm an advisor to a company called Privado that's doing static code analysis for privacy workflows as opposed to security. So we haven't really seen that on the market yet. Then there's the post-production, how do you manage privacy once you have established a relationship with a customer over that, the life cycle of the data. And so kind of we broke it out based on the life cycle of development and the life cycle of the data, and then kind of broke it out that way. There are hundreds of privacy tech companies right now, many of them B2B, some of them B2C, which is interesting to see, like, tools made for individuals to try to take more control over their data when they're dealing with other companies. I'm seeing tools, let's see, obviously we've got tools around data mapping, data governance, finding all that data. I'm seeing now, like, Big ID came on the scene with that, but now I'm seeing companies that are doing that for mid-market. I'm seeing privacy tech vendors doing that for mid-market companies, because in the past, the discovery capabilities of a Big ID were really reserved for enterprise based on the pricing. And so, small businesses and medium-sized businesses that were trying to comply with GDPR and CCPA were, didn't really have tools at the time. So a lot's coming to market for the small and medium-sized businesses. I'm seeing people using, believe it or not, blockchain and as access control, or I actually do think that the blockchain space is going to be a real good tool for privacy, in that it allows you to then be able to use like zero knowledge proofs to be able to extract data, from an individual, like, are you over 21, for being able to gain access to a physical space or a digital space, and without even compromising any of the other information about you. So instead of having to show a license to a bouncer that has my address on it, I don't want him to see my address. I just want him to know over 21. I think there's a lot of deployments based on new architecture like blockchain that will allow actually be, privacy enabling. There's a lot going on right now. It's an explosion. It's really hard to even keep track of it all.
Super fascinating.
So you mentioned the blockchain. So let's talk a little bit about that. Can you educate our audience a little bit as to what Web3 is, or Web 3.0? Sure.
Yeah. So in Web 1, we had just static content on the web, right? You just put up a page and someone else can read it. In the Web 2 space, we have dynamic content, which made the web pretty social, and we were able to have this bidirectional conversations and a much more, we call it social web. And that's brought us also the rise of big tech and surveillance tech. And so as a result of that, because the original web was designed to share data, it didn't have protocols put in place to secure data. Any of the security stuff we've kind of added on since the original web was put in place. But that didn't always address the privacy problem. And the fact that surveillance capitalism, people have lost kind of control over their own data. So Web3 is a set of protocols and new technologies that are going to enable, that are being developed now. Some is actually in place. Some is being developed. And it will allow people to have control over their own information through technology like decentralized identities. So we'll be able to go and find a virtual space and plug in there and manage our own keys to our own identity. We might even manage several identities, because we don't only just have to have one. Privacy wise, in one particular space, maybe I like to share a lot of details about my health. So my identity is going to be a little different. Maybe I have an avatar, maybe, it depends on the space. But then I want to plug into another space where I just, maybe I'm in an anime and like, I don't know, talking about something else. I mean, I'm not in anime, but just giving an example. And I could plug in with a completely different, it's still me, but different aspects of me that I want to share with this organization. And I'd own the keys to each of these identities. And instead of having to rely on third parties and intermediaries to facilitate my identity, whether it's an Okta or Facebook login or any other Google login, it would be I'd log in myself and I'd have the keys on the hardware that I'm showing up with. So decentralized identity is a huge part of Web3, but there's so much more, right? There's so many other technologies. It's going to enable us to basically cut out intermediaries. So when we talk about being decentralized, we mean that power is not centralized in one organization anymore. It gives us a lot more freedoms to, that's the stated goal, to basically be able to give people more freedoms to have control over their own identities and how information about them is shared.
There was a follow-up to that.
I bet.
It sounds like what you're really talking about, which is exciting in the privacy space, is how can we use decentralized digital ledger technology to enable people to interact with each other, but also protecting their privacy? Are there any other kind of specific examples that you can share? Because quite frankly, one of the challenges that I see when I work with companies in the Bitcoin space, non-fungible token space, is how do you know that the person with that digital wallet is actually Deborah or Jody? So enter maybe some of this decentralized way of authenticating people's identity without having, to your point, give the bouncer the address. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things you're seeing or the excitement in that particular area?
So when you say that particular area, you mean like the authorization and like KYC and like?
I guess what I mean is when you talked about putting technology around, instead of you giving the bouncer your license that has your
Right.
name and your address, talk a little bit about just giving the audience an inkling of the opportunity with blockchain on how that could be used for privacy purposes.
Yes. Okay. So just to set it up first, for the last 6 months, I've been working with a company called Hedera, which is actually a competitor to blockchain in that it is hashgraph technology. So the founder actually created something that we believe is better than blockchain. It hits every button. It solves the blockchain trilemma in that you can have, all three: speed, decentralization, and security, all of them without compromising any of them. The technology is different from blockchain and it's patented, but it is a distributed ledger tech. And I do believe that it's going to be the future trust layer of the internet. So my view of blockchain is through learning Hedera Hashgraph first, and then comparing everything. It's a very unusual view. It's just how I got into the space. So distributed ledgers, I wrote a white paper for Hedera. It could be used by anyone who's a DApp developer, decentralized application developer, or you're building a DAO or whatever you're building on a blockchain. This is for you, even though I wrote it for Hedera. But it basically, this white paper, and I'll send it to you so you can share it with your audience if you'd like. It pretty much goes through how do you architect in a Web3 environment, how do you architect for privacy and be a privacy enabler? And it gives a crash course on data protection law for developers without the legalese. Just kind of here are the requirements and here's why it's important, what you need to do. So that said, I would say that my advice would be don't put personal data on the blockchain. What you can do instead is put hashes on the blockchain or Hashgraph that actually correlate with the data that you're holding, in a database off chain. And you obviously got to secure that like normal. But what you're doing is the data will become pseudonymous. Because this way, the company collecting the data and putting it on the blockchain is only putting hashes there. The point of the hash is for verification and timestamping and like when did this happen? So Hedera has a consensus service capability that's timestamps every single fair ordering of transactions. So it's then able to kind of put any developer can kind of like query the mirror node and find out what transactions have happened and in what order. And as a result, I've seen this used for gating for consents, like basic. Okay, I'm getting into too many things at once here. I've seen this technology used as you could use an NFT to store someone's consent. And so for you, Justin, this would be a native NFT, not one that is meant to store value and share amongst other people. But Hedera has an NFT capability that's just native to their chain. And you could use that non-fungible token, which means it's unique. So to store like Deborah Farber's consent in this moment. And so let's say it's a clinical trial for healthcare, and you want to make sure that every area to get my consent along the way, I've gotten it. Maybe I've revoked it. Maybe I've give my consent again for a clinical trial, but then you have to update that consent again to say, for another medicine trial related to it or something else. Like basically my understanding is for clinical trials, it's a constant negotiation process of consent, not just a one-time thing. And as a result, you can keep updating your system to store that consent as an NFT. And it's 100% auditable in real time. So what I'm super excited about is we're going to start seeing real-time systems, being able to show us our personal data, but only to the right people, only to us, using NFTs as access control to data even. And then being able to have instant audits. So all of these discovery processes we see to try to find the data that has been let out of the barn, instead, we'll be able to have this is what your current state is of personal data right now. And it's instant. And, you can pull it up. You just basically can pull it up instantly, and you don't need all this complex software trying to search for where that data is. So if you build it right, this is what I'm saying, shift left. If you build things right and you architect for privacy problems today, then we can kind of prevent all that paper chase and that the constantly trying to tag the data later on and try to figure out and sort it out and find that data later.
So Deborah, if you think about companies today, and you started sharing, many of them are at a low maturity level. We just talked about some really cool and fascinating, sophisticated privacy technology company. What do you think are some of the big challenges that companies are facing today?
Well, I think it depends on the size of the company. So with enterprises, I think the biggest challenge is that we've in the privacy space, so much technical debt exists that it is a really big project to do compliance for privacy in the larger companies. Because, if you've been around for 30, 40 years and you've got, hundreds of thousands of employees and data's everywhere, cleaning that up is a huge mess. And finding talent that wants to clean that up and really honestly, it's the developers that have, not just developers, but if developers had written code and things are now stuck in the code over time, it's really been an uphill battle to try to get them to want to work on fixing their code versus innovation. And it's the same with privacy professionals. I burnt out from Amazon for this. I was working on trying to help onboard companies to data deletion tools, and it's mind-numbing work, and it truly burnt me out. So I think it's going to be hard to hire continuously to find good people to clean up after people who've moved fast and broken things for years. I think that's a big challenge right now. I think you got to hire a lot more privacy engineers, a lot more privacy product managers and privacy consultants and advisors to actually get a team together to come up with strategy around maybe re-architecting some things rather than cleaning up exhaust at the end, because it's just a constant paper chase. You're never going to stop the exhaust that way. You're just getting, it's just it's a constant problem. So fix that problem up front. Yes, it's going to cost money now, and it's going to cost more money, but it is better than keeping the status quo. which will most likely, result in fines and potentially lawsuits, depending on whether we get a federal privacy law. Yeah, so I would say for small businesses, they don't know where to start, and a lot of the technology that was out there for privacy is not exactly easy for a one engineer shop, or so what I'm seeing now is a lot of no code solutions coming to market that are going to be helping small and medium sized businesses that have a smaller tech shop or don't have the funds for a large privacy project to hire a consultant. So that's what I'm seeing to address that gap.
You know what I think? I think if Jeff Bezos is listening, you should be offering more Amazon people in the privacy department a seat on the next space flight.
On the next space flight, if they want it. Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. I'd love to see if you can make that happen, Justin.
Might be a little above my pay grade, but anyway, as a privacy pro, what is the best personal tip that you might give at a cocktail party?
Yeah, so my favorite tip, whenever I'm asked this, is that very often when we're talking about privacy in a company, we're talking about how do we shield the company from liability by being non-compliant. And I just want to remind everybody that privacy is about protecting people. And even though we get a lot of pushback within our jobs at times, that is the one thing that I think we can always emphasize and even get others to kind of wrap their brain around the whole problem when you reframe it from, privacy is about data protection to, no, privacy is, it is, obviously about data protection, but reframing it as privacy is about the people that we're servicing. They're not just consumers. They're not just, our product is being consumed by some entity. It's no, privacy is about making sure that we're doing our obligation as a company to make sure that this data is protected because we want to protect this person. We don't want them to feel surveilled. We don't want them to have exposure. We don't want them to, right? And so everything should be working backwards from that framing. And it humanizes. It really makes people realize like, oh, I guess I really should fix the code because it might actually harm a human, as opposed to, is a regulator going to come knock on our door? To which, why does a developer care? I think it just really will spur more humanity. You really see yourself in that when you're talking about human beings instead of like some capitalistic consumer.
Completely agree. I tell people all the time, you're talking to humans. Companies are buying because one human decided to evaluate another company designed by humans. It's humans making decisions and choices all the time. Now, when you're not busy advising companies and trying to change the privacy landscape, what do you like to do for fun?
What do I like to do for fun? Well, I'd say two things right now. One, we got a puppy recently, and honestly, he's been taking my fiance and I on a lot of walks. So it's definitely, I've gotten a lot more active, and we've gone to parks and, just play all day with the puppy. His name is Jameson. He is the best.
What kind of puppy?
Yes. And what'd you say? I'm sorry.
What kind of puppy?
What kind of puppy? He is a Beagalier. So he's part Beagle and part Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. So it's just great, friendly personalities and like part hound, and he's wonderful. And then the other thing that I've been doing for fun lately is really diving into the world of NFTs, at least in the Hedera space, where they're only like a fraction of a cent, like half a penny to send. So it makes it economically viable, and really learning what is it that people are finding interesting about trading non-fungible tokens. So I believe that Justin and I could probably have a discussion for hours on this. I can even see the wheels turning right now. I know we don't have time for that, but it is definitely a hole that I've fallen into over the past few weeks, and I'm actually enjoying way more than I thought I would.
If you were to create a little community of people who like to do this and find this fun, you have at least a group of two.
Excellent. Oh my gosh. Okay, great. Well, maybe we'll talk about that offline or another, venue.
Well, I'm so glad that you joined us today. If people would like to learn more about you and connect and what you're doing, where and how should they do that?
Oh, that's a great question. So let's see, to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm everywhere all over the web pretty much as Privacy Guru. That goes from my email address is Gmail, privacyguru@gmail, to Privacy Guru, on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. So find me on social media. I love social media when done right. And I don't really have a website right now. I'm doing like contracting work, but it's most of the work I'm doing. I didn't even actually say this at the beginning, is I'm on the advisory board of 9 privacy tech startups. So especially if you're in that area, if you're endeavoring to build something in privacy tech or want to figure out how to get involved with the Rise of Privacy Tech, the organization that is defining this space and bringing the whole space together, then let me know. I'm here to help, and I love when people reach out. So.
Well, thank you again. We really appreciate such an enlightening conversation and a really fun emerging space in the technology world.
Oh, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.